The steady growl of a vintage motorcycle sliced through the stillness of an empty morning lot. Its engine purred low before fading to silence. The rider didn't immediately dismount. Something had caught his attention. Across the parking lot, barely visible under the flickering lights, an older man struggled to push an unruly chain of shopping carts twice his size. Each step was labored, each movement weighed down by more than just gravity. The rider watched, his expression unreadable, behind dark sunglasses. Then, with a quiet resolve, he turned off the ignition completely. He didn't know yet, but what happened next would not only shift the course of that man's life, it would leave an echo in hearts far beyond the parking lot. Elsewhere, in a humble, weathered home tucked in a quiet neighborhood, morning had just begun. Dim light filtered through sheer curtains, brushing against the lined face of Earl as he sat up in bed. His joints groaned in protest, but he didn't complain. Pain had long ago become routine. He took a breath and steadied himself. He had someone counting on him. In the adjacent room, Margaret still slept. The silence around her was gentle, like the hush of a memory. Earl peeked in, his face softening at the sight of her, though Alzheimer's had stolen much of who she used to be. Her presence still anchored him. She was still there, somewhere behind those distant eyes. Every morning he reminded her and himself of their love. "Good morning, my sweetheart," he whispered, holding her hand. She didn't speak, but her eyes blinked slowly and her lips curled, barely into a smile. That was enough. Earl made her breakfast. Simple toast, a cup of warm tea. He helped her to the table, steadying her as she moved slowly across the kitchen. The space was modest, but it held warmth, in the old wedding photos on the walls, in the faded paint chipped from years of memories. As she sat, Earl carefully organized her medications, the colors and shapes now as familiar to him as the pattern of her favorite robe. He spoke softly, not expecting her to answer. "We've got another day, my love. That's all we need." But in the living room, reality waited coldly. A stack of unpaid bills sat on the table like a silent verdict. He picked up the top envelope, stared at the red letters stamped across it, and sighed. "Maybe they'll let me stay a few more hours today," he murmured. Hope these days came in small doses. Before heading out, he kissed Margaret's forehead. She was holding their wedding photo, cradling it like a child would a treasured toy. "I'll be back soon. Try to rest." She said nothing, but her eyes held something, recognition, or maybe just a flicker of peace. Earl held onto it as he walked out the door and looked up at the rising sun. "Just give me the strength," he whispered. "That's all I ask." The market was already busy by the time Earl pulled into the lot in his aging sedan. The car coughed gently as he shut it off. His knees ached as he stepped out, retrieving his faded vest from the back seat. It was frayed at the edges, buttons barely hanging on, but it was his. He wore it like armor. "Let's get to it," he muttered as he limped toward the scattered shopping carts. Morning heat already radiated off the asphalt, and he knew it would only get worse. Still, he worked, slowly, precisely, gathering carts into neat rows, pushing, pausing, breathing through the pain. Each movement was deliberate, but behind his slow rhythm was urgency. He couldn't afford to fall behind. Management didn't care about aching joints or sleepless nights. They wanted results. A young man nearly collided with him, hurrying past. "Sorry, sir," he called, not bothering to stop. The word echoed in Earl's ears. "Sir," he smiled wryly, a reminder. Time was catching up. Suddenly, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Earl, why are these carts still everywhere?" The manager, barely in his 30s and forever impatient, stomped toward him. Earl straightened as much as his body allowed. "I'm getting them sorted. Just need a bit more time." The manager scoffed. "You always need more time. Maybe if you worked faster, we wouldn't need someone else covering for you." Earl said nothing, no argument, just nodded and turned back to the carts. But his movements were sharper now, angrier. The wheels clattered against the pavement as he wrestled the metal rows into place. His knee gave a sharp warning, pain shot up his leg, and he gritted his teeth. He reached for one last cart when it slipped and rolled toward a nearby car. With a burst of effort, he caught it just in time. The strain nearly dropped him. He clung to the handle, chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. "One more day," he whispered to no one. "Just one more." Above him, the sky was a soft, unbothered blue. He looked toward it and closed his eyes. "God, I'm not asking for much. Just help me get through this." Across the lot, someone had been watching. The motorcycle still sat parked in the shadows, its rider unmoved, helmet now resting on the seat. Dressed in black, the man watched with quiet intensity, sunglasses masking his expression. But something had shifted in his posture. When Earl bent, when the manager barked, when the cart nearly rolled into traffic, the man didn't look away. He stood slowly, pulling off his gloves, and began walking across the lot. Earl hadn't seen him yet. His focus was on the carts, on his next breath, on hiding the grimace each time his knee protested. He didn't notice the quiet footsteps until they stopped just beside him. "Need a hand with that?" Earl turned, startled. The voice was calm, gentle, but steady, a voice used to being heard. He looked up into the face of the stranger and paused. Something about him was familiar. The face, the stance, the quiet kindness in the eyes. Earl squinted up at the man now standing beside him, still catching his breath. The stranger's presence was calm but quietly commanding. There was something almost familiar about his face, the beard, the way his eyes studied him, not with pity but respect. Still, Earl shook his head gently. "Don't worry about it, son. I've got this handled," he said with a weary smile, trying to straighten up despite the burn in his knees, but the man didn't budge. His eyes briefly scanned the scattered shopping carts before offering a patient, quiet reply. "I insist." Before Earl could object again, the man had already stepped forward, guiding the carts alongside him like it was second nature. Earl blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Appreciate it, really, but this is my job. Don't want to get in trouble," he mumbled, attempting to regain control. The man paused, offering a thoughtful glance. "Sometimes the strongest ones forget. They don't have to carry it all alone," he said softly. "I'm just lending a hand." Something in his tone firm but kind unlocked a bit of the wall around Earl's pride. After a sigh that had more weight than breath, he nodded toward another cluster of carts. "All right. If you're set on helping, might as well start over there." The man gave a nod that almost felt like a promise. As they fell into rhythm side by side, he asked casually, "How long have you been working out here?" Earl pushed a cart forward with both hands, his voice quiet but steady. "Few years now, started after my wife got sick. Needed the income, ain't easy, but it's what I've got." The man listened, his silence more powerful than words. He wasn't just making conversation, he was trying to understand. Sensing that, Earl opened up more than he expected to. "Her name's Margaret, used to light up every room she walked into. Then the Alzheimer's came, little by little. Now, some days she forgets her own name. Still, I see her in there, somewhere." The man didn't interrupt. He only nodded, eyes reflecting a quiet empathy, eventually. After wrangling a long row of carts back into place, the man gestured toward the cafe window. "Come on, let me get you something to drink." Earl hesitated. His mouth was dry, and the summer heat was pressing down. He wanted to say no, but the exhaustion in his bones had already decided for him. "All right, one coffee wouldn't hurt." They walked to a nearby bench outside the store with 2 steaming cups. Earl took a sip, letting the warmth settle in his chest. The man leaned back, gazing at the busy lot. "You ever think about retiring?" he asked gently. Earl chuckled, but it came out more like a sigh. "Retire? With what money?" "Sold the house years ago to pay for Margaret's treatment. Furniture, car gone. Just kept what she needed." He stared at the coffee, his grip tighter now. "These days, every dollar goes to medication. That's the priority." The man didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "You've given up so much." "That kind of love, it's rare." Earl shook his head. "It's not heroic. It's marriage. When you say for better or worse, you mean it. You don't walk away just because the road gets steep." The man looked at him for a long moment. There was something In his eyes, something deeply stirred. "You're stronger than most men I've ever met," he said quietly. Earl smiled faintly. "Might just be stubbornness." They shared a brief laugh. But the man wasn't laughing inside. Something had shifted. Earl's quiet resilience, his unwavering love, it had left a mark. And though he didn't say it aloud, a plan was already forming. As they returned to the parking lot, the man's questions continued, not out of nosiness, but concern. "How's Margaret doing now?" Earl took a moment to answer. "She's holding on. Some days she smiles, other days I'm a stranger." "Today, somewhere in the middle," the man nodded slowly. "And the treatment? You said you sold everything. How are you managing now?" Earl paused beside a cart. He leaned on it as though its weight steadied his thoughts. "We make do. The market job helps, barely, but her meds, they're expensive. I can't afford to miss a single refill." The man didn't speak. His jaw tightened slightly as though holding back frustration, not at Earl, but at the world. "And you?" he finally asked. "Who takes care of you?" Earl smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Doesn't matter, long as she has what she needs." They stood together in silence, carts lined up in neat rows around them. Finally, the man placed a hand on Earl's shoulder, a brief gesture, but it carried the weight of deep respect. "You're the kind of man the world needs more of." Earl's expression softened. "I've made my peace. Margaret comes first, always." The man nodded but said nothing more. Not yet. For the rest of the shift, the stranger stayed helping. Earl, watching him endure without complaint, witnessing how he moved with dignity even when scolded by the same young manager from earlier. When the day finally ended, the man extended his hand. "I hope this isn't the last time we talk." Earl shook it, his grip firm but tired. "If you keep hanging around this lot, it probably won't be," the man smiled. "Count on it." Earl limped toward his car, disappearing slowly across the lot. But the man remained behind, seated once more on the bench, hands folded, mind racing. He had seen enough. He couldn't rewrite Earl's past, but maybe, just maybe, he could help rewrite his future. That night, in the quiet of his home, Keanu Reeves sat at his desk. Earl's story echoed in his head like a song he couldn't stop hearing. He didn't know why their paths had crossed that day, but he was certain of one thing: he wasn't going to walk away. The next morning, Keanu returned to the market. He walked straight to the manager's office, calm but purposeful. "I'd like a word," he said. The manager blinked, recognizing him. "Sure, how can I help?" "I'm here about Earl," Keanu said. "And I need your help to give him the support he's never asked for, but more than earned." The house stood still, soaked in the golden hue of late afternoon. Earl shuffled into the kitchen, clutching a worn piece of paper in his hand, his fingers trembling with age and the weight of memory. The market had closed early today. Keanu had arranged it. He said Earl needed a real break. But Earl knew it wasn't just rest Keanu was offering. It was space. Space to process the quiet storm still swelling in his chest. He sat at the table, the one that once held anniversary cakes and late-night soup for his wife when her cough wouldn't let her sleep. Now it held a single envelope, beige, plain, unassuming except for the way it pulsed like it held a heartbeat. Earl opened it slowly. Inside, a note, handwritten in flowing black ink. "Take care of her. You are not alone." His breath caught. The message was simple, yet it carved a canyon through his silence. It wasn't signed, but he knew. The handwriting had no name, but it didn't need one. He could feel Keanu's voice in every curve of the letters. He looked around the empty room, his eyes finding the old armchair across from him, the one where she used to sit wrapped in her floral quilt, knitting and humming until the TV faded to static. Tears touched his cheeks before he realized he was crying. He wasn't ashamed of them anymore. Not since Keanu showed up. Not since someone reminded him that kindness still had hands and feet and eyes that looked straight into your soul and said, "I see you." He placed the note down and picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the call button, then dropped to his lap. He didn't need to call. He didn't need to say anything. The message had already said it all. Someone was out there, watching over him, lifting the corners of his world back into place without asking for thanks or recognition. Outside, the sky began to turn dusky pink. A breeze slipped through the window, brushing against his face like her fingers used to do when he'd fall asleep in the chair next to her hospital bed. He closed his eyes and let the silence settle again, not heavy this time, but warm, almost like music humming just beneath the noise of the world, and in that stillness, he smiled. Not because everything was fixed, not because the struggle had ended, but because he finally knew he didn't have to carry it all alone.